welcome Brandi Kelly to the podcast today. I'm so
Thank
excited
you.
to talk to you, Brandi. Can you introduce yourself to us and let us know a little bit about who you are and what you're up to right now?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brandi Kelly. I am the host of the Sober Bartender podcast. I've been a bartender for 20 years and I am a sober bartender. I've been sober for 2 years. So my main focus in life right now is navigating, dealing with life on life's terms, still being in the party scene, but not being a part of the party, and really just coping with how, to deal with situations and see them as opportunities to grow and to learn as opposed to living in like a victim mentality. Recently, I just got married July 30th, a week before my wedding. I was living in north of Seattle. A week before my wedding, my husband is a baseball coach. He got offered a job at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, down at the tippity top of Texas. And so he accepted. And so we got married, we packed up, and we moved to Texas. And so getting here and kind of being removed from friends and family was a great opportunity to like go inside. A lot of my work is internal anyway, but then just kind of being isolated, instead of letting that get me down, I really just started digging and pulling these things out. And that's when the podcast was born. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So I have so many questions floating around in my mind right now. So let's go back to the very beginning of your life and let us know where you were born and give us anything. I like to start with maybe an early memory, if you have something really early on that you remember.
So I was born in the LDS hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Wow.
Yeah. To high school aged parents. My mom was a junior in high school, and I think maybe my dad had just graduated. They weren't married or living together, but their parents did convince them that getting married was a great idea. So when I was a couple months old, they got married. Then shortly after that, they divorced. My mom remarried when I was 3 to my stepdad, Sylvie. And I think she was pregnant when they got married with my little sister, Margarita. One of my earliest memories is definitely trying to juggle the two dads situation, living, being 3 and getting a stepdad and, looking at him as a father figure, but then spending, weekends and holidays with my biological dad and, being so young that not knowing how to navigate his feelings on that. Like I got a pair of earrings, like a little cheapy earring kit from my stepdad. And when my dad came to pick me up, he said, "Oh, those are pretty. Where'd you get those?" And I said, "My dad gave them to me." And he said, "I didn't give those to you." And it was like, I could see that I devastated him in that moment. And that was like the instant that I learned that I had to behave a certain way in order to get the affection. And like I learned that I needed to adjust my words and my actions in order to get what I felt I needed. And I was probably like 5 or 6.
Wow, that is huge. It's interesting that you say it from a child's perspective because you don't think of it, how difficult that is for a child. You don't understand that, your biological father's feelings are going to be hurt by that.
In retrospect, I mean, he was probably 21 at the time and also a child for the most part. So part of my work now is just realizing that everybody did their best, and sometimes their best sucked, but it was their best nonetheless.
I just said that this morning. I really believe that everyone is doing the best they can under their circumstances at that
Yep.
moment. And we learn, and then you do better. And that's what it's all about. Oh my gosh. Wow. What a story. So little earring story. And so then you lived nearby with both families living close by. And yeah, that was in Utah.
Mhm.
When you were very young, did you go to elementary school in Utah?
I did kindergarten and first grade. Actually, I grew up in a small town outside of Salt Lake, about 45 minutes outside, called Grantsville, Utah. And it's a small farming community. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a horse rancher. He was pretty prominent in the farming community. And then my mom's parents were retired and just did, some side jobs. But it was like a very big difference between the two families. Because one, like when I went to see my dad's family, like they would take me shopping and I would get Z Cavariccis and we would go to Limited too. And I had all these matchy outfits. And my mom's house, it was like, you're fed, you're clothed, you're alive. you're good. There's a lot of love in both places, but very different love. But when my mom and Sylvie were newly married, they moved to Salt Lake, and she actually let me live with my dad, with my biological dad and his wife. And they had my little brothers, Tyler and Nicholas.
So how old
So
were you when you did that move?
that was kindergarten and first grade. So
Okay.
that was like 5 and 6, about 6. So yes, I lived with them. My dad was a heavy drinker. It's not up to me to classify anybody else as an alcoholic. That's something I've learned in my own recovery, but very heavy drinker and occasionally violent and scary drinker, not towards me, but definitely like his wife at the time. There is some trauma there, but a lot of it has been blocked.
Mm,
So I always say more will be revealed. So
yeah.
when I'm ready, it seems like my subconscious will let little blips up here and there. And I appreciate that because it doesn't just come at me like a freight train.
Absolutely. That's an interesting protective device we have. And so you lived there for just a period of about 2 years.
Mhm.
And then you felt, what was the tone?
Interesting. I don't have memories of my mom during that time. Like, I don't remember where she lived in Salt Lake, but I vividly remember living with my dad. The tone was good because in that small town, it was like 3,000 people. Like, my grandma was there. I have an aunt that's 3 years older than me that was like a big sister that I never had. But there was just eggshells. Like, that was eggshells of just not wanting to set off a bomb. And there's a lot more expectation, a lot more pushing to like less acceptance and more expectation living with my dad.
Okay. Expectations like to get good grades and that kind of thing.
Not really because I was so young, but it was more so like behavioral or saying the right thing. Like, he got me a watch for Christmas, and it was like really his way of teaching you how to tell time was like expectorant as opposed to like a loving, guiding kind of teaching. If that
Like
makes sense.
like he had these ideas of these benchmarks that you had to
Yeah.
reach in his way. So then after you lived with him for that period of time, where did you go then?
So when I was 8, so just before second grade, my grandparents on my mom's side moved to Laughlin, Nevada, which is on the Colorado River, borders Bullhead City, Arizona. They moved there, and my mom decided to follow. Yeah, we left Utah. I don't know the particulars of how that affected them, fortunately, between getting me out of state. But I did move with my mom and my stepdad, Sylvie. We briefly, on the way there, lived in St. George, Utah. My stepdad's aunt and uncle owned a restaurant called Locos Tacos. And there was like a little studio upstairs, like a little bedroom and a bathroom. And we lived up there. And that's when Margarita was born. That's when we were living in this Mexican food restaurant. And I hated Mexican food. So I would eat peanut butter and jelly on these amazing, warm, fresh, homemade tortillas. Yeah.
That is great. So you lived there.
And then shortly thereafter, we did move to Bullhead City and Laughlin, and we lived with my grandparents for a little while.
And what was that like?
Things got interesting when we moved there. We did get an apartment in Laughlin. It was kind of scary. Like, I remember just going to a new school was kind of scary. I was in Laughlin from second and third grade. In fourth grade, Mom and Sylvie split up, and we moved across the river to Bullhead. So my parents are casino workers. Laughlin, Nevada has like a small strip of casinos. So I think my mom was a waitress at the time. Sylvie was a food and beverage director. So everybody that lives in that general area, for the most part, works at those casinos. So we moved to Bullhead City. That was really confusing. That was really, really tough. A year later, we moved back to Laughlin, moved back in with him. I had a lot of responsibility. My little brother Emmanuel was born around that time. And, with mom working a lot, and then Sylvie was working and sleeping, a lot of the responsibility of the kids was definitely put on me.
At what age?
I'm 8 years older than Manny. We're all about 4 years apart.
Okay.
So I'm 4 years older than Margarita, 8 years older than Manny.
Wow. So you were about 8 years old and you were
Yeah.
a little baby.
For the most part. Fortunately, in the apartment complex we lived in, my grandparents lived close. So there I would, be charged with getting the kids over there when it was time so that grandma could watch us. But I definitely had to learn some basic like making meals. And it was also around that time living in those apartments when I did take my first drink.
Wow.
I was about 9.
You were about 9. What was that? Can you tell us the story?
Oh, sure. I was not ever told like don't drink or do drink or this is good or this is bad. Just, but there was a bottle of Jose Cuervo that was always on the freezer. My stepdad drank beer, but it wasn't like a whole lot. It wasn't like my dad. But yeah, I remember I would get home from school and let myself in and then wait, I would wait for my little sister to, I don't know. We'll hold that thought.
Okay.
But I got home, nobody else was there. And I remember seeing the bottle and I just remember thinking that I'm not supposed to have it. And I just wanted to try it. Like I was just so curious. And so I did climb up on the counter and I got a Cuervo, like one of the grossest things that you can drink, poured it into a glass and took a big old swig and I got sick and was miserable, but I didn't tell anybody. I put it back. And I didn't necessarily like the way that I felt because it tasted gross and it felt gross, but I loved that I did something sneaky. Like I loved getting away with something. So that
So,
was the beginning.
wow. So that was the beginning.
Mhm.
All right. So from there, did you stay in that place for a while and go to school in that area?
It was 2nd and 3rd grade in Laughlin, 4th grade in Bullhead, 5th grade in Laughlin, and then 6th grade we moved to Bullhead and we got a double wide trailer. And that was nice to be out of the apartment. And we had a yard. So I did live there. I lived in Bullhead through high school, but it was when I was 12 years old, my mom divorced Sylvie. When she left Sylvie went off the deep end. Sylvie started turning to, drugs and alcohol to like soothe what he was going through. And 12-year-old me lost it. I just saw that my mom was hurting Sylvie. I did not empathize with her situation whatsoever because his pain was so outward. And so, with the kids still going to see him, I still went with him also. So I would do things to hurt my mom and to hurt her new boyfriend, Greg. At 12 years old, I got Valdez, which is Sylvie's last name, tattooed on my lower back by a neighbor. Sylvie started selling drugs also. And so I would hang out with the other people that he hung out with, which were grown men smoking meth and selling drugs. And at 12, I had a 24-year-old drug dealing boyfriend. There was rifles and drugs and I immediately tried to grow up. And what I've realized now is there was a lot of things that were scaring me and I had no control over anything. And so making those big girl choices, I felt like I was taking some control. Like that was my reaction to fear, was to like try to run straight into it.
And were you like, you were drinking at this time when you were 12?
I was still like sneaking it. I wasn't like openly doing it. It wasn't regular yet. I would do it like socially,
Mhm.
but it hadn't taken over.
And they were treating you like an adult, basically.
My stepdad wasn't, he just was kind of in his own world.
Okay.
So being at his house, like he had a younger girlfriend and, she thought it was fun to hang out with me because there was, like I was trying to be the grown up and I think everybody kind of chuckled at that, not realizing how deep it went. When I was like, I think a year into that, I was hospitalized for anxiety and depression. Las Vegas was only at about an hour away from Bullhead where I was living. And so my mom decided to check me in and put me inpatient. And I told everybody that my mom locked me up in a mental hospital when really I wanted to go. Like it was a cry for attention and for help. But I was really, really resistant to it. Like my mom was there at every step of the way, just trying to pull me back. And I was just, every chance I got, ripping away. Like I always had a backpack to run away. I was the kid that looked at you and said, what are you going to do? Like I should have been on Maury Povich or something.
So what do you think about that anger at that time towards your mom?
I definitely see, I mean, now I understand that most everything that I've done is fear driven. Most everything, all of my responses and my choices were driven by fear.
Of what?
Lack of worth that started really young. I've unpacked all these things in doing 12-step work and
Yeah.
in recovery, but definitely just fear of being unlovable, fear of being unworthy, fear of not being worthy of a healthy household. I realize now that most of my choices, like most of my choices that lead to something negative, because even though then I was a kid, like I still made those choices. Like I believe that we totally get free will. And I could have gone towards my mom and let her wrap me in a blanket of love and just embrace that. But I just pushed and I
You
only
would.
went
You
towards
would.
what would hurt me.
And so what about your biological dad at that when you were up until about 12?
I would see him on like every other Christmas and in the summer. And he was in charge of school clothes. He always, made decent money and we never had any. We were usually scrounging. So that whole time between when my mom and Sylvie split up and up to about 15 is really kind of all jammed into one thing, to where just my reckless behavior was like a series of unfortunate events. But I do remember around age 15 going to see my dad, and we were school clothes shopping, and we were with him and his wife Kathy, and I was trying on pants and they saw my tattoo, and that devastated my dad. And Kathy was kind of the go-between, to where I would kind of manipulate her, like I would sneak cigarettes and do all the things that I wanted to do. But that really devastated my dad, because he felt like he was doing his best and I felt like he was not good enough. And so I deserved to treat him like I was treating him, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I did manage to like get away from the drug dealer boyfriend, but I continued to like put myself into all these. I realize now that I was changing the way I think and feel with people, places, things, alcohol, drugs, like whatever. So I didn't become like a drug addict, even though I experimented with meth and with marijuana and with pills. Um, it didn't take over. So I had a lot of chances to not go down that road.
Yeah.
I did move in with my biological dad when I was 15, and that was a nightmare.
Wow.
Um,
So
I
from 12 to 15, you were still you were in the lifestyle with your stepfather's connections.
Yeah, and then I would just, outside of him, I would seek out. Didn't necessarily facilitate, but he didn't shut anything down either, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you were just that was your lifestyle at
Mhm.
that time.
And I should note that it was around when I was 15, his parents realized how bad he was doing, and they moved him and his wife. And at that time, he then had two daughters. And so his parents came and rescued him and got him out of it.
Okay.
But I was still there.
You were
And
still
I felt abandoned and I felt left and unworthy. And
and then after that, after Sylvie left, you went to live with your biological dad.
yeah, because I still thought I hated my mom. I couldn't stand her. And so I went and lived with my biological dad, and that lasted for 3 weeks.
Wow.
When I got there, I got the talk that I was not allowed to be promiscuous. And so I instantly was on the defensive, like, you're calling me a whore, when in reality, I was making negative life choices, but I didn't think anybody knew. I snuck off. His wife has a daughter, Nicole, that's a couple years older than me. And I snuck off and got my tongue pierced and like tried to hide that. And I was, sneaking, smoking cigarettes, and he was totally against that. So I was not willing to like follow any rules or any structure, and I blamed everybody else.
And what happened after the 3 weeks?
I was walking, I had like one friend at school, and we were walking home from school, and my dad pulled over to pick me up, and I smelled like cigarettes. And so I got, the whole, 20 questions. We got back to his house. He dug through my backpack. The friend's boyfriend's phone number was in my backpack. And
Mm.
so he accused me of, being a whore and hanging out with boys. And so I think he said, like, you just need to call your mom. And I was like, I need to get out of here. Like, instantly, anything that was bad at my mom's couldn't be as bad as this. And so I called my mom, and it's a small town. So I just ran to my Aunt Charles' house, my mom's sister's house, and asked her to take me to the airport. And I think my dad bought me a ticket, and I was out of there.
You were out of there.
Hmm.
Back to your mom.
Yep.
And so did it get any better at that point?
I don't think I was grateful. Like it still wasn't enough.
Did you finish out high school there?
Yes, I did.
Right.
Yes. I did graduate high school. I got a non-drug doing alcoholic boyfriend.
Okay.
Like I got just like a normal all-American boy. And so the codependency was really strong there. And that lasted for a couple of years. But
Did you always
um
have a boyfriend from
yeah.
like 12? So did you feel like you had to have a boyfriend or what was going on with that?
No, I didn't feel like I had to, but like definitely it just I was always trying to fill a void. Like I didn't know it then, but I
Mm.
can see,
Yeah.
I just there was always a great big hole and I was just trying to fill it and I was grasping at straws, trying to stuff anything in there because I never felt comfortable being me.
Wow. So you graduated from high school in that area, and then that was Bullhead, you said?
Hmm. Bullhead City, Arizona.
And then what next?
So I graduated high school. I started dating a guy. I worked at a drive-through gas station, and there's a guy that would come in and he had twins that were 5. So I was 17 and I think he was like 23 or 24. But he had these cute little twins and we would chat and then we ended up getting together. He was married, but the wife had left. When she left, I felt that I needed to save him and these kids.
Mm.
Like I was somebody that could come in and just make their life better. So
Wow.
at 17, I became a stepmom. And it took about a year and a half for me to realize that that was not what I wanted my life to be. So I look at myself as kind of a tornado where I blow into someone's life and then I blow out and just kind of leave the wreckage behind.
Wow. Did you think of yourself back then as a tornado?
No, ma'am. No. It was not until in doing like the work that I've done to where I'm like, man, I just was so concerned with my needs and what I needed. And I felt like I was helping people. And maybe I was in small ways, but really it was a lot of carelessness and just self-serving.
Well, that was just a different way of trying to fill the hole.
So shortly while I was dating him, I ended up working as a bartender. I was 19. And in Arizona, you can serve alcohol at the age of 19. I was working at the Inferno. I had not really been in a bar. So that's kind of how you learn. Like you see what a waitress does. So you have an idea of how to wait tables. Right? Like I had no idea how this worked. But the regulars that went in there used to all go through my gas station.
Mm.
So it was like there was a small friend group of these older guys. I started working at the bar and I had these, friends and customers. And during that time, my mom and Greg and the kids decided to move to Hemet, California.
Oh,
And I did not want to go from one middle of nowhere to another. Then I was living in Bullhead on my own. I had a little single wide trailer that I rented and it was like $300 a month and I could do whatever I wanted. And I got a chest tattoo and I had a Nova, like a 78 Chevy Nova, and I just felt like hot shit.
at 19.
Hmm.
So then what happened after that?
A couple months into working at that bar, it wasn't like a biker bar, but this group of biker dudes came into my work. And granted, like I did not care for motorcycles. I did have a motorcycle accident somewhere in the story that I missed, but I had bad road rash. So I was kind of scared of motorcycles. But this group of Hells Angels comes into my bar and one of them is like hitting on me and he's 6'4" and he's kind of scary and that's kind of exciting. And so I end up going for a ride with this guy, but the ride turns into bringing me to Las Vegas for like 4 days. And he's doing like a wheelie at every light on his Harley. And I'm going into bars and I'm at these clubhouses. And I just think like, this is the coolest thing ever. Right? Because it's like, there's all this adrenaline and it's like this uncertainty, but it kind of feels safe because I'm in like the presence of someone that can protect me. We just kind of kept in contact. Like we didn't date right away, but anytime that he was in town, he would call me and we would go run around and gamble and, hang out. And then after about 5 months of that, he said, like, you're way too cool to live in this trailer. Do you want to go to Scottsdale and live with me? And I was like, yeah. So I jump on the back of the Harley and I just take off. I call my best friend and I'm like, hey, the keys are under the floor mat and she's already babysitting my dog. So eventually I did go back and get my car and some clothes and stuff, but I just up and moved to Scottsdale. And that was like a whole different world. So yeah, I dated that guy for 11 years, from 19 years old to 30.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
So
so
did
get
you live in Scottsdale that whole time?
No, I lived in Scottsdale for 2 years. So
Okay.
from 2004 to 6, I lived in Scottsdale, and it took some time to adjust to being away from everybody because I had lived the majority of my life in Bullhead City. But I did start bartending. I lied about my age. I was still 19, but you can legally do it. I had the serving card, but I lied so that I could drink where I worked. But yeah, Scottsdale was interesting. Nothing too crazy really went on, but I was like this whole different world. Like I'm going, with this guy and I'm getting like insights into like this whole different world, and the rules that I know are kind of shifting, but there's that expectation of me, but there's this structure around it. Like
So what was that world like, that living with that in that like a
I
biker
mean,
club?
it wasn't like you see on TV or anything. Like we
What's it
ate
really
really.
like to be that girlfriend of a Hell's Angel?
I can only speak to what it was like for me. We ate really healthy. We went to the gym. We got to travel a lot. I've been to Germany. I've been to Amsterdam. I've been to Austria, just like clubhouse to clubhouse. I've got to see a lot of the country and a lot of the world because of that. But in my own personal experience, like there was an expectation of me to keep my shit together,
Mm,
like to kind of not ask questions.
mm.
You don't be nosy, you don't snoop, you don't ask why, you don't ask where, you don't, you get a really limited view of what your business is. Like right now I live in my hula hoop. My hula hoop was very small. So it was fun, but it was also hard because in 2006 we moved to Las Vegas, and this was for his purposes. Like he worked from home, he built motorcycles and sold parts. We kind of had the house where nobody called before they came over. We just had like the open door. So I really loved that I got to like feed a whole bunch of people all the time, and like I got to be nurturing. But moving to Vegas and bartending there, that's when like it became more regular for me to drink at work. I started like drinking more, but then, with him, it was more like we can party when he says it's time to party. So most of what I did was in service to him.
Mhm.
So I see now looking back that like anything that I was doing for me was like squashed. Like that was definitely frowned upon and that was pushed out of the way because he likes the fact that I was moldable at 19, and like I was able to serve his needs, and I cooked the food and I paid the bills and I cleaned the house and I would take care of his friends, but then I could party it up and I could,
Mhm.
I stopped being able to turn off the party. Like I partied too much, I started doing little bumps at work because somebody would have some of this or some of that. And then I was always trying to cover it up and lie about it because I didn't feel like I could be honest. Because anything that I did do that was, drinking or partying with him, like that was his call. But I didn't get to do what I wanted to do in my time.
Mhm.
And so the more I hit it, the more like compulsive I got about it. So yes, being like an old lady, it's not like one of my mom's friends asked me, one of my friends said, like, I read that like some of the girls get chained to a motorcycle. And I'm like, no. Like we were pretty normal. It wasn't, I mean, there were times where things got like uncomfortable or intense but like my house got raided once and that was pretty terrible. But it was for we were never charged of anything, but it was for allegedly like embezzling from the Salvation Army. because he
Oh,
was a car scrapper. Like he had those signs, I pay cash for junk cars, and we would drive around, but they had to have a title to take them to the scrapyard. So that wasn't, it was unfounded. They just had a reason to go into our house because they're like, this is a Hell's Angel. I'm sure we can find something, but
right.
they didn't. So
Okay. Wow, that's an interesting lifestyle. And
yeah.
so that was your life for about 10 years.
Yeah, 11 years. But
11
in there,
years.
like I was doing all the drinking and all the partying and like the hiding and the sneaking. I was also an amateur boxer. Like I was, I was boxing. I competed in Fitness America in a Jay Cutler Desert Classic, like a bikini fitness competition, like bodybuilding shows. And that was really tough because that was like, I started trying to find ways to like not be sucked into the drinking. So like the drinking became like my reward instead of like my everyday. So I would do these things, but it got really consuming, and that took a lot away from being able to take care of my then partner. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so that was very short lived. But I like would do these things and like lean, and I've got the gnarly like spray tan on me and all that. And then I'd get off stage, and all of my customers and like coworkers from the bar would be down there with shots of vodka, and I would just go nuts. Like it was the biggest.
How
Yeah.
did you keep your body so like trim and be drinking all the time?
I would work out like almost every morning because it was more binging back then. It hadn't become like full-fledged like
Okay.
alcohol like dependency yet.
Mhm.
But I would drink every day. I would just drink like chilled vodka, but I still worked out consistently. Like even after having shots, I would go to the gym. I would do like 10 shots at work and then go do an hour on the stair mill.
Wow.
But mainly, I mean, I weighed my food. Like I ate protein, carb, veggie. I ate 6 meals a day. I had like a fitness coach that, would determine what I ate, and I would follow it to a T, except I would not cut out the alcohol.
So after that, you go through this 11-year relationship with the Hell's Angel guy.
Yeah.
What ended that relationship?
So the end initially came after 10 years. He just told me we were sitting at my friend Johnny's bar. And he just kind of mentioned, like, I'm ready to be done with this. And I went into like this big old scene, and he had said, I want to talk about it at home. But long story short, we go home and he says, you do whatever you want all the time. He's like, if you want to get fucked up all the time, if you want to drink all the time, if you want to do drugs, you don't have to hide it anymore. Do whatever you want, but it doesn't work for me. Like I need somebody who's on the same program as me, and we're not there anymore. And I couldn't accept that I drink and party too much for a Hell's Angel. I could not, would
Yeah.
not. So I begged and I pleaded but then he says that he met somebody,
Mm.
and, he's rationalizing like that we've basically been over anyway since I've been lying, because that's one of the biggest rules is you don't lie.
Yeah.
Like
And he knew that you were hiding it. He knew it.
oh, he knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would sometimes eat like cloves of garlic after leaving work to try to cover up the alcohol smell. I would rub like bleach on my hands and on my face so that I smelled like anything horrific except for booze. So yes, he did end up leaving, but he still had his shop in our home garage, because I had ended up buying the house that we lived in. He had owned the home that we owned previously, but he filed bankruptcy for over $800,000 because we bought houses and motorcycles and cars and this and that in his name, like during 2008 during the crash and that.
Mm.
So he couldn't buy a house anymore. So I owned the house, but he still would come and work in the garage. But every time he would come over, I would beg and plead and promise that I would change. And I would try to act like I wasn't, hungover from doing whatever the night before. But yeah, I get a little,
No, I can
uh,
tell that is upsetting to you. That must have been
it
really.
is, because that was such
Mm.
a time of desperation. I don't like to put anybody else on the hook. I get so worked up because I look back at where I was at. Like I had so many options and I had tunnel vision.
Yeah.
I could only see that one way, and that way just led to pain and more misery. And like I had no view of myself. Like I could not look at my actions and see that they were hurting me and hurting people around me. And it was a blessing that that relationship ended, but it didn't end yet because I begged and begged and begged and I grinded him down enough that he did end up coming back. So he did end up coming back, but he would not put his clothes back in the closet. He kept them outside in a trailer so that I knew that he was going to leave at any time.
Mhm.
And that lasted for that whole last year. And things were really bad the last year. Just living in that fear of not knowing when he was going to go. Like I had that, I thought we were going to be together forever, like after 10 years, and that being what I known for my entire adult life. That last year was very painful, but I did not change a thing. I did not change my thought process. I just got sneakier. Like I
Mm.
had a drive service that would drop my car off at the corner of the street so that it's because I couldn't drive myself home, but I couldn't have him know that. And we have cameras outside the house. So I would just find these elaborate ways to keep trying to cover my tracks. And then in October of 2014, he said, I'm moving to California. Like I need to do this. I want to do it. There's opportunities for my work and for my, whatever. He's like, I'm going. He's like, you own the house. You have a cheap mortgage. Stay here. Like, do your thing. I wasn't having it. Even though it was a hell year, I was not having it. So he moved and I sold the house
Mm.
and packed everything up. And I moved to Lake Elsinore to follow. And I got there and it was right away. It was brutal.
Mm.
He didn't want me there. I was putting like responsibility on him that he didn't want. He really was being rational and saying, like, being around you makes me so angry. I don't want you near me.
Mhm.
And I was so caught in that like trauma bond and that like
Mm.
I was just addicted to it almost. Anything felt better than what I felt by myself.
Yeah, because you had never been alone.
No, no, no. So it took about 3 weeks.
Mm.
And um, I realized that it was going to be dangerous for both of us if I stayed. Um, there was a moment where we were in a truck on a freeway in California and I had like nowhere to go. And I was like, I have to get out of here. And he kept telling me, I've been telling you, get out of here, get away from me. So as soon as we got back to his house in Lake Elsinore, I packed up my little Honda Civic and my mom lived about an hour and 15 minutes away in Hemet, California. So I moved to my mom's
Mm.
and she lives in an apartment there and she put blankets on the couch and I lived there for the next 5 months.
Back with mom.
Back with mom.
How did that feel?
It didn't feel anything because I had sold the house. So I had made like 70 something thousand off the house. So I split the money with him because although we weren't married and it was in my name, we were still a couple. So I gave him half the money, half out of, integrity
Yeah.
and half out of like trying to convince him that I'm wonderful and he should still want to be in this terrible relationship with me. But yeah, so I've got like 38 grand. And I don't really have any set plans. I'm just living on mom's couch. I have nowhere to, like, no idea what to do with myself. Like, I'm not living for somebody else, so I don't know how to live. So I just turned to drinking because that's what I know how to do. So, I had the comfort of my mom and her love, and I would wake up and she would have her coffee, and I would have a coffee cup with Tito's in it. And I just
Did
let
she
it take
know?
it.
Did she
Yeah,
know?
yeah. But I was, 30, 31 years old at the time. And so she just, she would come to me and say, like, that this is a problem. And I'd say, yeah, I know. But that's it. And so my mom, she just wanted me close so that she could take care of me. And so it took 5 months to drink that money.
Wow. $38,000.
Yes, ma'am. Holy shit, huh?
Holy shit. What happened when it ran out?
So then I started, I was working 2 nights a week at a nightclub, like in Temecula, which was like 30 minutes away. But I would like get bombed all day and just be in and out of like taking a nap, waking up and drinking. And I would drive into Temecula, already intoxicated, and I would cocktail at this nightclub. But I was drinking so much there that I wasn't really making any money, but I was making enough to drink.
Mm,
So then I really had no direction. And so yeah, I'm living on mom's couch, and a friend from Vegas reached out, and he was like devastated. He was like a bartender friend and a friend of my ex and I. And he said that his wife texted him while he was at work that she was divorcing him and wouldn't be home when he got home from work. And so he was devastated. So we start commiserating. And then he realizes that every time he talks to me, even if it's in the morning, I'm slurring.
mm,
And so he says, "What are you doing? Get your head out of your ass. Come to Vegas. I'll help you get on your feet. You know, at least here you can build yourself up. You can make a life for yourself. You have a network." And so I jumped at it because here's something besides me.
mhm,
And so I go down there and I instantly just latch on to this friend. And he was not in any place to be latched onto. I mean, I'm sure he had a hole to fill in his self, but yeah, I already decided that we were going to be a thing. I hadn't really done any healing or any, I mean, but being with, you know, this other person, being with him gave me a reason to try to drink less because he didn't like that and he wouldn't tolerate that with me living there without having a job yet. So I lived with him for a little while, and then he wanted to get out of him and his wife's house. So he went and rented a room from a friend. So I could not stay there. So then I couch hopped, and I found myself like resenting the people that I was couch hopping from because they would get frustrated with me. And I'm like, well, you invited me here. Like, what do you want me to do? And still really little self-awareness. Like really, I was still I felt the victim of every situation. I did start working. I did not like it. I didn't like the bar that I ended up at, and I did get fired. But before I got fired, I got a condo. There's these luxury mid-rise condos on the south end of the strip in Vegas. And I did get approved to move into a condo. So I had a place to live. The boyfriend, he said he wasn't moving in, but he did co-sign for the apartment. He did bring his furniture out of storage to move into the apartment, but wasn't willing to say that we were living together or that we were a couple. And I think it took maybe a couple months, but I did get a job at this bar called Putters right across the street. And great people there, like still like that family is still my family. But the guy ends up moving in. I'm working, I'm drinking a whole ton, but with him, I'm sneaking it a lot of the time. Like I'm taking him dinner at work, but I'm like twitching, trying to hide what kind of shape I'm in. But we had like we didn't have a healthy relationship. It was built from
yeah,
a really messy place.
yeah.
We did split up after like 2 years.
Oh, okay.
You know, he told me that he was done and I threatened to kill myself, and just really stuck in this loop, like just this loop. And I just didn't see any way out of it. I just felt like it was everybody else. Everybody else was doing all these things to me. Like I couldn't figure it out. So he split up with me, but he still was living there. And so I went back to Old Faithful, begging and pleading. And I did ask questions. Well, like, you know, do you think maybe if we live separately, we could try dating? And do you think this? And do you think that? And then he came home and he had clear and apparent signs that he had been intimate with somebody else. And like that sent me back right to like, you know, the previous situation. And I went off the deep end there. Like he moved out. I went right back. It was like that 2 years never happened. You know, that was when I just intentionally bought a bottle in the morning, We had gotten 2 Boston Terrier puppies, and so I used those as like a maneuver to see him. You know, it should have been that he got one and I got one, but I manipulated that. And I promise that there is a happy ending to this story. I am not, I paint myself as a terrible person because I'm well aware of my actions and all of these things. So while other people did have things that they did, I totally see that they were in their own story, right? But the story that I was telling was like that they were all doing this to me, not realizing that I was totally choosing all of these things. These are my choices.
Right, right. Yeah, we don't realize that. But I do not I just want you to know that you may say that you're a tornado or a terrible person. That is not what's coming across. What's coming across, and it's going to make me cry because what's coming across is a wonderful, like very compassionate woman. Like your energy is so loving. So don't I hope that you don't beat yourself up like that now.
No, 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 no.
You really
No, I
come
just
across
don't, I don't regret it. I
you
just
come
don't.
across as like a very, very compassionate, loving person. So
And who I am now loves that girl.
yeah,
I loved her for her struggle. She just did, I didn't see another
but
way.
you have to, and this is so funny that you're saying this because I have been thinking about this with my whole premise in doing these conversations with people is that you have to take a look at the past. You cannot run away from it. Living in the present is the goal, and that is wonderful to be able to do that, but you can't ignore that everything that's happened to you over the course of your lifetime has contributed to who you are in the moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are things you have to wrestle with
Yes,
instead of
'cause
just saying pushing them away, because if you just push them away, they're going to come back. Life will hit you over the head until you learn what you're supposed to learn. So
and that's the big thing for me is that I'm totally willing to look at all of these things and like put a microscope on them because it makes me grateful every single day for the way I get to live, and especially tied into my alcoholism.
yeah,
Because it's not all alcohol, it was all like a soul sickness.
yeah,
Alcohol was a symptom for me, it was
yeah,
a solution for me, just like people were, men were, relationships were, all of these things. There was that hole, right? But all these lessons are going to keep coming my way until I'm willing to, like, until I learn them. And
hmm,
I still get lessons that come
yeah,
my way. Like I
absolutely.
still catch myself people pleasing and I don't recognize it until I'm uncomfortable. So this discomfort that comes becomes this great opportunity for me to go within and maybe go back and go,
Yeah.
this is what this is.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So
really miraculous when you learn to recognize that, isn't it?
it is.
Just feels because it's always all the information is there. We just have to learn how to recognize it and interpret it.
So the Course in Miracles. I don't know if you've heard of the so
I've
the
done it.
course. So
I've
the
done it.
course, yeah, wonderful. I have not, but I do. Like I'm doing like a side study. So I've read like A Return to Love by Marianne Williams, and then I follow Gabby Bernstein pretty closely, and so she has like a mini workshop that's based on the course.
Yeah,
But it's like that's the holy instant.
yeah,
Like that's turning from fear to love. Like that's that moment.
yeah.
And like I couldn't have those moments before. I had no, I was so blocked from everything, and I was so negative and I was so just in the bottom of this hole that I wasn't open to anything that could
Mhm.
make my life better.
But when that happens, when things like that happen from such a young age and you get caught up in that spiral or, in that hole, the point when you realize that you really are responsible for what happens in your life, I don't know when that transition happens, like when you can really figure that out, because when you're a child, you do have free will, but you don't have control. And then at some point you realize that you have control. And then your maturity level maybe doesn't allow you to get to the headspace where you can advocate for yourself. So it's a really interesting thing to ponder that. But
It is.
like for you to get caught up at such a young age and start your first drink at 9 and then 12 with the dating the drug dealer guy, and then just always having somebody in your life that you continue to perpetuate that same cycle. So what happened then after you was this your rock bottom, you think, when the second guy? Okay, so tell us.
No.
Okay, so keep going,
Uh, so,
going,
um,
baby.
so I'm living in the condo. I've got my job, but I'm in the world's biggest pity party.
Mm,
So I'm unapologetically just sloppy. I'm going to work with the makeup from the night before. I'm, not leaving the house unless it's to take the dogs out or to go to work. Like I'm I'm down in it. See, I got suspended from work. Like my boss and I are, we were close, but he came to me and he said, there was some accusations that you appeared intoxicated. And I said, yes, that's true. And he said, okay, I need you to leave your shift and, we'll see you in a week. So my car wasn't there because the day before I was driving drunk and I had nailed a curb and I broke my axle on my car. So I was on foot. And then I get home and one of my puppies, one of my little Boston Terrier puppies, she's like sick. Like I can't figure out what it is. And so I'm calling friends for rides to take me to the vet. And I'm, joking with them how, I just got suspended from work. So I have time to deal with this. And her intestines are bound with like the string from a toy. And it's going to be a $2,500 emergency surgery. And I have no money. So I'm calling the ex-boyfriend because I've still got him on the line with the dogs.
mhm,
He's not answering because he probably thinks it's one of my desperate pleas to
mhm.
see him or whatever. But I had started hanging out with another old friend that I was like keeping a secret. Like I was basically just using him as somebody to make me feel better because he's kind and he's thoughtful and sympathetic. But anytime the ex-boyfriend wanted to come around, I would push that guy away. So I call that guy and he shows up and he is willing to pay for it.
Mm.
And then he wants to like come around and, he wants to like bring clothes into the closet. And I'm like, no, 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 because I'm still hoping that the last guy will come back. And then eventually he does move in. So this was over the course of just a couple months. And the ex tells me that he is going to have a baby.
Mm.
And somewhere in there, I found out that my tubes are blocked. And I think that that was definitely a blessing. I think that, I mean, maybe we don't know. We don't know if I could have maybe, I woke up then. But I do feel like I was divinely protected because I wanted to fill a hole with that as well.
Mhm.
So it really, really upset me to find out that the person that he had cheated with was now pregnant and that they were getting all of the things that thought I wanted.
Yeah.
So I've got like this nice, thoughtful man who sees completely the mess that I am and is still willing to try to help me. So we start like dating, and we move from the condo. We get a house. We've got a pool. His parents are kind. They love me just the way that I am. I feel like I have like a family. He's got a brother that's got kids, and I'm becoming friends with his wife. And so I'm like babysitting the kids, but he drinks like me. So he doesn't bat an eye at the morning shots of vodka.
Mm.
So in that relationship, over the course of it, we did get engaged. I was like shaking every morning by that point. His family would go to Tahoe for the summer. Like we would rent out half of this resort on Lake Tahoe. And I like made shirts like with the Vista Cruiser, like we were the Griswolds, because I thought it was adorable, all of us on the same flight with the same shirt. So there's like this sense of normalcy, except that I am falling deeper into my alcoholism. I'm more regularly using cocaine, like I'm going through about $100 a day because he's paying all the bills. So
Mhm.
I can focus my money on this. He calls me at work. And well, before that, we were in Tahoe and everybody wanted to go to breakfast, but I didn't have anything to drink. And so nobody realized that this is an emergency. But I go to breakfast and I'm sitting there and I'm shaking and I'm sick and it looks scary. And his parents own bars. So
Mm.
like they see what's happening here. And that was the first time that anybody saw me not drinking. So it's not that I necessarily got like this blackout, fall down drunk. It was that I just always had that steady stream that made me, you
Not
know,
have the symptoms of withdrawal.
Yeah, and I was, more open to talk, and I wasn't anxious, and I was kind of jovial and fun to be around. And then, at the end of the night or early into the morning is when the shit show was. So most people didn't see that. Yeah, I had to like leave breakfast, go get a couple shots, and then I could go back and I could eat with everyone. But that was the first time that I kind of recognized by seeing other people look at me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like that was my first moment of realization of how bad it had gotten. A couple months after that, there was all these promises of like, oh, I'm going to stop drinking and we're going to try for a family and I'm going to, as soon as we get home from this vacation. And there was all these like dates that just kept getting pushed back. Well, he calls me and he says I had to call 911. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I had a heart attack. So I rush home from work because I live like 4 minutes away and I'm able to ride in the ambulance. But I do run in and do a little bump and I do a shot and then I get in the ambulance with him. And his blood pressure is like skyrocketed. So we get to the hospital and I'm sitting with him and I make sure I let the doctors know, like, hey, he's a heavy, drinker and he's going to DT if you don't address that.
Mhm.
And he didn't want them to know that, but I'm like, you're going to get sick. So they gave him like the, anti DT drugs, whatever that is. And he had to be there because he nearly had a stroke. Well, I sat in the hospital room with him and I started DTing. Like I'm having this, like I'm not having seizures, but I'm convulsing almost. So I call his brother and I'm like, can you just bring me a thermos full of vodka?
Mm.
Like just so I can sip on it while I'm here. Cause he's living with us by that time. So he brings me this thermos full of vodka that I can just sit, and I'm still kind of getting sick from the time that I didn't have it.
Yeah.
But that was when I really saw I can't take a break. I can't slow down. I, at this point, am like physically dependent on alcohol. It's no longer like a mood thing. It's no longer a fun thing. It's a necessity. He gets out of the hospital and he's still got the pills to not drink. So I'm going in the closet and drinking so that he doesn't see. And he knows, but this person is, he's not going to judge me or tell me I can't do something. I just didn't want to rub it in that he couldn't. So I started thinking like, I really need to do something about this.
Mhm.
And I think it took another like 6 months to a year for me to do anything about it. He started drinking again. And so it just kind of rolled back into that same thing. Yeah, the next months it was like the more I thought about not drinking, the more I drank.
Mm.
And I would wake up in the morning and I would say, I'm just not going to take that first drink. I'm just not going to do it. And I would start the shower and then I would run out and pour myself a shot of vodka and drink it at 5:30 in the morning so that I could get in the shower to be to work at 6:45. I started talking to people, talking to my customers. Some of them are nurses, like it's Vegas, you don't know. But I mean, I'm an open book. So I'm going like, no, I really think I need some help.
Mm.
Like I really need some help. And one of my friends, she said, whatever you do, don't try to stop cold turkey. Like you can die from benzos and you can die from alcohol if you quit cold turkey.
Mhm.
And she said, try measuring out like an ounce every hour. And I would be able to do that for like maybe the first half of the day. Then I would just go off the deep end. But I kept getting more and more desperate. Like I started feeling like I either want to die or I need to stop because I could not stand to live. Like I couldn't stand how I felt inside anymore.
Mm.
But your mind tells you like you still have a house, you have a job, you have a car. Like people still talk to you. You're not an alcoholic, but I can't live without alcohol. So what I thought an alcoholic was very limited then. So I did have health insurance, but I called the number on the back of my health insurance. There was a mental health services number. So I called and they sent me to Nevada Behavioral Health and they gave me an assessment. And I lied about the assessment. I drank excessively to go into the assessment. He said, I think you really need inpatient treatment. And I'm like, no, I do not need to go inpatient. Like that's somebody else. I just need a break. I just need somewhere where I can reset. And he said, you can go to detox, but it's like, it's not a band-aid. It's not going to do what you need. Like you have acute alcoholism, like advanced.
Mhm.
But I did go to detox and I fought it tooth to nail, like going in and I told my then fiance, like, I'm going to try to get out of this and don't let me. And once those doors shut, they don't let you out.
Mhm.
So your liver enzymes should be in the teens, like the high teens, 16, 17, 18. My liver enzymes were in the high 400. I was like, I should have been dead. Alcohol, like blood alcohol, it was like a 0.4. It was like 0.08 is the legal limit. And it was misery, like being in detox. But I did it. And I thought that that was gonna like do the trick. I thought, okay, after this, I've got to reset. So now I can just drink on like holidays or camping trips but I did go to an intensive outpatient treatment. Outpatient treatment is 3 hours a day, 3 to 4 days a week. And you learn about why you drink. You learn about your neurotransmitters. You learn what it does and how long it takes to get out of your system. Like your brain is kind of fried.
Mm.
Like when you're getting all this information, you're not really absorbing anything. I mean, it's good in theory, but like I was still a mess. But people in there did convince me to go to meetings. Being sober, like I no longer could stand being with my then fiance.
Wow.
I felt guilty because I knew that I had used him to pay my bills, to fix my dog, to give me a place to live, so that I like, to facilitate all of the things that I wanted. And without being numb, I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't be intimate. I felt horrible. I felt guilty.
Mm.
And I kind of reverted back to like 12-year-old Brandi. There was like a bad guy in the outpatient program, like face tattoos. And I was like, that makes sense. I don't have anything else. I need a thrill. So I
Mm.
left the fiance and I started running around with this guy that lived in sober living. That was short lived, thankfully, but a really dangerous person, in and out of prison for 35 years. Like narcissistic, that was my first real experience with narcissism, to where I like learned what it is to be gaslit. Like for someone to tell you, you should go drink, you should go kill yourself. Like I've been in really bad situations and no one's ever talked to me like that.
Mhm.
But that narcissistic rage when you try to like pull yourself back like that was my first experience. And it was just a couple months. So fortunately, that scared me enough to just chill. I was living with my best friend Candy and her husband Johnny. They had a casita and like a little, mother-in-law quarters in their backyard. And so I had a room and a kitchen and a bathroom. And I got to be with just these people that loved me. And it was great. And then COVID hit.
Mm.
And I mean, fortunately, I was saving money because I was living with them. They didn't really let me pay for anything. I stopped going to the meetings. So by that time, I was going to meetings and because I didn't like, I got so uncomfortable not drinking and just being sober. Like I hated how it felt. And we call that untreated alcoholism,
Mm. Mm.
because you had this solution and now you've taken it away. You still have all the things that you started with. I did that for a little while, but then once COVID hit, I stopped. Like I didn't do Zoom. I didn't, I didn't call my sponsor. I kind of avoided her. I felt like I could do it on my own. I got really cocky, but I hadn't drank. And it was like May of 2020. I had a friend from the first bar, from the Inferno, actually from the gas station before that.
Mm.
This guy that I ran around with for a short time, that was a friend. We had kept in contact over the 20 years, but not like constant contact. You have an old friend you talk to every 5 years and it's like great catching up, and then you don't talk for another couple years. He had been trying to get a hold of me and I was kind of blowing him off. And so he had sent me a message. So I called him and said hi, and we, caught up, and it's like, oh, when this whole pandemic thing is over, you should totally come up here and check out Washington. And I'm like, no, there's no one that can decide what's essential and non-essential. And that is where my recovery shifted, because they say that the root of our disease is selfish and self-centeredness. We're not terrible people like alcoholics as a whole, but we're really selfish and self-centered when it comes to a lot of our actions.
Mm.
And we learn that when we unlearn all the things that we learned to survive with our affliction.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I got really selfish. I hopped on a plane. I flew up to Seattle, hung out. Of course, it was great. It was great seeing him, and I felt like I had distanced myself for long enough because I was, single for a few months. So I flew back home and I packed up my car. And that time, my dogs were living with the nice ex-fiance because Johnny and Candy had a dog and mine were aggressive. The dogs get into a fight. One of the dogs loses her eye. I've got to split the dogs up. So he takes one dog, I take another. So I'm bringing this dog that just ripped her sister's eye out, and I'm going to move her up to Washington into a 600 square foot apartment with another Boston Terrier with no idea how they're going to get along, but probably not good. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, when I get there, I want to drink. Like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it the right way. Like, I'm going to drink like a lady. I'm just going to drink if I'm out to a nice dinner. Everything you learn in Alcoholics Anonymous is like, once you're a pickle, you cannot become a cucumber. Like, once you go past the line, you don't get to go back. But I just got it in my mind. And it's just been a couple months. Like, I'm not praying. I'm not meditating. Like, I'm not relying on a higher power. And I think I'm just running my life. But I know what happens when I run my life. I have all this evidence, but I'm ignoring it. So I moved to Seattle and I drink the day I get there. The dogs got into a fight the very first day, and I didn't call a sponsor. I didn't find a meeting. I drank. And then I was sneaking shots of whiskey in the morning, and I did find a great job. And I found some of the best people of my life, like my coworkers from that job. Amazing. I'm living in this really small space. He works nights and sleeps all day. I'm still, despite, all my actions and my inner turmoil, like, I'm a pretty positive person. I'm not like doom and gloom. And I like the sunshine, and I like to look for the positive and the silver lining. And I take pictures of clouds. And he is not that person. He's like stubborn and bullheaded and just not complimentary to me. So of course, 2 months after I moved there, we got married. And first time I ever got married. But yeah, we got married. We drank, but he drank a bottle of Jameson at the place where we got married, which is at the bottom of a waterfall. And on the hike out, he fell off the mountain 50 feet. He did not die. He's alive. Because he was drunk, he didn't really brace. So he only got scuffed up. But like, he had an L1 or L1 to L5. He had like a spinal fusion with screws and pins. Like, one little snap and he would have been done. But he wasn't. So we had this little secret COVID wedding with like 8 people there. And he fell off the mountain. Wouldn't go to the ER because he didn't want to miss the reception. I don't remember the reception. I instantly regretted all of it. I regretted moving there. I regretted the wedding. I regretted drinking. I mean, just shame, misery. Like, I cried every night. And I blamed him, but I had enough recovery in me that I knew that I had a little responsibility. And I really was mad at myself.
Yeah.
And I knew that that wasn't going to help me get out of it. But I felt so stuck. And I felt like I brought him into that too, and that's kind of what I mean by the tornado, is like, he didn't need to get sucked into it, but he did, because everything goes the way it's supposed to. His choices, brought him there too. But I was miserable. He told me I was like physically abusive. I was blacking out all the time, so I couldn't tell you. I was calling my mom and like texting her and telling her, what I do tonight isn't your fault. Like, I, just know that I loved you, and basically like sending her these suicide notes, and just miserable. I just wanted to die. And he said, you've got to stop drinking. And I'm like, I don't know how to stop drinking without help. So I've got to go to AA. And he said, I don't want you to go and be like those people. I don't want you to get different. I don't want you to get better. Just don't drink. And I'm like, I can't do that. So I started going to meetings, and he hated it. He resented that I was going to meetings. He resented that I was changing. I instantly got a sponsor, and I picked like the toughest, strongest person that I saw. She was like the most intimidating. She's still my sponsor today. But yeah, went right to work. So my sobriety date is December 10th, 2020. And it's been a little over 2 years. December, I got sober. In February, we split up. So that was a blessing, but we did live together for like 4 months. That was terrible. I lived on the couch. There was like a really scary time where was really unsure, but I was relying on a power greater than myself at that time. I was able to pray. I was able to, reach out. I started, I was meditating, and I was just reading all the time, going to meetings, being of service. I just got out of myself. I stopped thinking about what I want, and what I just started looking at what I could do, and everything changed. Not like the time before where I just didn't have alcohol, like everything inside changed, everything. And in doing like the 12 steps while going through this divorce, and I'm listening to Ram Dass. I don't know if you're familiar with Ram Dass, but love everyone and tell the truth. And all these spiritual teachings that I've heard before sounded totally different, because I was absorbing everything, and I was just so open and so willing to anything and everything that was good and that was light and that was love. And it made it able for me to like walk through that gracefully and treat him with love and tolerance and kindness. And it took a combination of all of these things. Like it took, being focus on the course in miracles, and focus on, the teachings of all these spiritual leaders, because I was spiritually bankrupt. Like I just felt like I was on empty, and I just filled up my cup every day. After 4 months, he did move out. And then was the time that I got to set my first boundaries, like maybe ever, because then he started threatening, because I was saying, no, you can't just show up here anytime, like you're finally gone. And then he was threatening me, and then I felt in fear as I'm living in this apartment. And so I set boundaries, and I haven't talked to him since. Like he started sending more and more like hate messages, and I like prayed and prayed and prayed and got the courage to hit block, instead of sitting there and like absorbing all the negativity. And that's what I'm conditioned to do. That's what I've learned to do. I totally get the choice of whether or not I look at this. Right. And like we think that everybody just knows this common sense, but that emotional intelligence sometimes has to come from a really deep place of pain. Like some of us really have to be beat all the way down before we're willing to like hear these things.
Yeah. So you left that relationship. You had a turning point in your sobriety and your recovery at that point.
Yes. So I'm working at the bar, and living in my apartment, and I've got my dog. I'm just going to meetings and being of service, and I completed my steps. So I promised my sponsor that I would not date until I finished my steps. She just said, please give this your 100% attention. She said, that's all I ask of you. Some people say don't date in the first year. I'm saying do this, and then raise your hand to pass it on to another alcoholic. If you're doing that, I'm not going to tell you what to do. So I did that, not with the intention of the reward, but I did hold off. But in that time, I have made a new friend at my work that was a baseball coach right down the road. He was not like anybody I had ever really dated. He wasn't my type, but I was realizing that that was probably a really good thing. Like physically, he's my type because he's tall and handsome. I never really thought that I deserved someone like that, or that someone like that would want anything to do with me. But he had asked me out, like when I took my then wedding ring off. And I said, it was the first time I had ever said, I'm working on myself. I'm in the middle of a separation. Like, I'm just getting divorced, and like, I think you're really nice, but I've got to just do this right now. After my ex moved out and there was no longer any contact whatsoever, that's when, we had started kind of chatting. But when he was in the bar, it wasn't like a full-on flirtation, but it was just kind of nice. Like he was so kind. Like we had a lot of homeless people outside the bar. I saw one day he was out there like getting long johns and stuff out of his trunk and giving them to these people. And I don't know anybody like that. It's just not been my experience. And I just saw something different. And like, I'm in this place where I'm doing all this service in, the club. And so, and I'm doing all this work to where I'm seeing the world differently and I'm feeling more connected to humans
Mm,
and feeling less isolated. So to see this man that doesn't see himself where I see him on
mhm,
this pedestal, and it's just like kind and giving and loving, and see that there's a person like that who has an interest in me. I had an interest in getting to know more about him. So we went on a date where we were supposed to go axe throwing. That didn't happen because it was still like late stage COVID. So we ended up, he lived in his family cabin on the Puget Sound on Camino Island, so like an hour north of where I lived. So we ended up just sitting and talking and getting to know each other and like asking all the questions, because almost everybody I had dated besides the biker, I had known for 10 years,
mm,
right? Because I was with him for 11 years. And then the other two guys I had known were other bartenders that I had known forever. So this was like totally getting to know someone. And I
mm.
got to have just that really genuine new experience. It was neat. Yeah, we didn't move in right away, and we dated, and I did meet his family on like our third date. I got to go to 4th of July and meet aunts and uncles and mom and dad and cousins, and it was really neat, but we didn't get like totally serious. We did get pretty serious. I mean, quick compared to other people's standards, but not compared to my experience of what I've lived up to this point, right? But yeah, we just we got to know each other, and in doing my steps also, like we do an ideals list to where there I now have non-negotiables.
Mhm.
Like you have to have these values that match mine.
What are some
And
of those? Can you tell us some?
yeah, I don't have my list in here, but it was definitely like having a relationship with your family, or like a willingness to grow, communication and comprehension, not just like you like me and you're attractive, but like these things that really, really matter to me at this point.
Right.
Like,
Right. Inside things, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And like, it wasn't like not being sober or not sober wasn't one, but I put that they can't be an alcoholic. Like they can't,
Mhm.
unless they're a sober one. But really, I did not want to date in recovery because I don't want to mix that. I like recovery to be my place where I go and recover.
Mhm.
And I've seen things get really messy when people date in
Yeah.
like, shit where you eat kind of thing.
Yes.
So yes, so we start dating, and it's great. Like I kind of was waiting for like the bottom to fall out because it felt too good to be true.
Yeah.
Like it just seemed like those things don't really happen to me. But I didn't focus on it too much because like I didn't get a TV when the ex moved out, and it was like I was in this empowering time where like I started with just a couch. I didn't have any pots and pans, I didn't have any furniture, and I got to like get all those things for myself. And like
Yeah.
I was meditating multiple times a day and just still focused on what I wanted to do and what was important to me. And I learned what I like to eat and what I like to do with my time, and like how I feel about my schedule and how busy I want to be and how busy I don't want to be and how often I want to go for a walk. Like I didn't know any of those things,
Wow.
because I was just so caught up.
Yeah.
So by the time he did move in, I had like this solid foundation that I had poured for myself. So I wasn't just this broken person that was looking for someone to come and save me anymore. I was looking to meet someone as an equal, and not have to lift each other up, but just be able to stand side by side. And I would ask him like, don't you want somebody that's normal? And he's like, you're one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Like you're kind and you're thoughtful, and you've done and seen and experienced all of this stuff. And to me, it just seems so normal. Like trauma seems normal and chaos seems normal. And now that I get to live the way that I live, I'm like, oh, this is pretty normal too. Like this is good. So yes, we moved in together, or he moved into my place because his place was an hour north and both of our works were next to each other. But yeah, our little lives just kind of merged very nicely. And then we got engaged. I think it was February of, is it this year? Yeah, I'm sorry. Years that kind of blended together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we did get engaged February of this year, and then we got married July 30th of this year. And then that brings us all the way back to Texas.
And now you're in Texas and you've only lived there for a few months, right?
Yeah, we moved here August 30th.
So what are you doing with yourself in Texas?
So here I did, I found a job in a local bar, and it kind of reminds me of the first bar I worked at. It's like a fisherman bar, and it's, like little roughnecky, but there's like great older folks that go in there, and there's a lot of internal work for me to do
Mhm.
because I really have to use my voice and not dim my light, because it kind of seems like I'm at a point where everything is better than I could have imagined. And like I've manifested all of these miracles, but I'm still stuck in that mindset that, like, well, of course, one thing isn't great.
Yeah.
And it's not that my work isn't great, it's my perception of my work. Like I still see it as a challenge, I see it as an obstacle. And so I'm still working on shifting that perception from seeing it as love, like seeing it as something that I love.
Your job.
Um, mhm.
So how do you manage being a sober bartender?
I'm not in control, first of all. I surrendered fully. Like when I went back to AA, I surrendered any and all attempts to control my drinking. I can't control my drinking. I'm all or nothing. So I'm nothing. The first time I got sober, I wanted people to do what they did. Like I wanted them to act normal. I didn't want people to walk on eggshells and not drink around me. But I also kind of resented it. Like I was pretty pissed off that other people could drink with impunity, like without consequence, and I couldn't. Like, how come every time I drink, I ruin my life? And this time around, I don't feel that way, because I don't feel like I ruined my life at all. I feel like I went through exactly what I needed to experience, has been such a blessing, because I now can connect with people on such a deeper level, and I have an empathy that I would have never had. My experience can benefit others. Like I have a story that, hopefully it can give other people hope, that no matter how bad it feels or what story you tell yourself about who you are, you can rewrite that story at any time, because I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams. I never ever dreamed that I would get to live the life that I'm living now.
Wow. It's amazing. It's really
Mhm.
amazing. What do you think was the turning point? Like, what was there a switch? Like, what happened?
I think it was when I was up in Washington, like, I had a couple of rock bottoms, but that didn't bring me to my knees.
Yeah.
But being up in Washington and having like the mustard seed of what could be
Mm-hmm.
planted in my brain, but being so far away from my family, and it being during a winter storm, and realizing that I couldn't drive out, like I couldn't fly out, I could not escape, and just realizing that wherever I go, there go I. I couldn't get away from myself.
Yeah.
Like that was the point that I realized that I needed to go within.
Yeah.
Like that, being up there and putting myself in that situation, like making the choices that brought me so much pain.
Mhm.
But pain is the touchstone of spiritual progress. Very, very pain motivated. And now I don't have a high tolerance for pain anymore, like emotional pain and like mental pain. I instantly want to fix it now. I do not want to wallow in it. I don't want to carry it. I know, like right away, I call my sponsor. Like, if she suggests it, I seek outside help. I'll call a therapist. Like, I want to do the digging right away.
Mhm.
But I think that switch went off when I just realized that it's me.
Yeah.
Like, I get to choose.
Yeah.
I made this choice, so I can make a different one. And like that was also in doing the 12 steps, was, you look at all these things that hurt you, and then you look at what part you played in that,
Mhm.
and that can hurt you or it can empower you. Because if I got to choose that, that means I can totally choose something else, because now I'm armed with my past. I'm armed with this knowledge of myself,
Yes.
so I can choose differently.
Yeah. I love that you just said that. I'm armed with my past.
Yeah. Because, I think if I forget it, like if I tried to forget it, like,
It's a part of you. It's not, you can't It'll be like taking out your heart, like it's a part of you.
And sometimes I feel like memories come up, like I said, there are things that are blocked, and it feels like I read them in a book,
Yeah.
or like I saw them in like a Lifetime movie or something, and then I'm like, no, that definitely was me.
Yeah. How do you make any connections between your alcoholism and your dad?
I think it's definitely possible. My mom's father is an alcoholic, my dad's an alcoholic, or heavy drinker, whatever you want to say. But yeah, I think that's definitely possible. But I do think that it's a disease. I think it's something that I think that I could have drank, and I think that there's a threshold, because even when I was binging, there was like, if they would have given me like a life, like if I drank, that if you know what I mean, like if they told me you have to stop drinking or you're going to kill yourself, like there were points that I was at before where I could have stopped. So I
Mhm.
don't think I was destined to just go full bore, but once I did flip on the switch,
Mhm.
it's impossible to turn it off.
Yeah, once the physical dependency kicks in,
Right.
it's a different story. Does your husband drink?
Mhm.
And you are able to just
I
manage?
really don't, I do not focus on what other people are doing. I mean, obviously I want my husband to be safe, but he's not. Like I ask him like, so are you gonna drink today? And he's like, I don't know. Whereas like my alcoholic mind was like, okay, so when I get to this place, I'm gonna drink, but in front of these people, I'm only gonna drink this much. But then when I get home, I'll be able, or oh, I'm not gonna drink today. It's an obsession.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
does not have that
Mhm.
because he's not an alcoholic.
Mhm.
He's a casual drinker.
Right.
So that's just come with time and obviously with my career. Like
Mhm.
I'm not responsible for what's in your cup. It's not my business. Like it's my business as far as bartending goes, cut somebody off or whatever to protect them and other people. But aside from that, like I no longer am concerned. I'm here if somebody wants help. And I would say I can get you drunk or get you sober. Like
You seem to have such a sense of power now, like an empowerment has come upon you through this
yeah,
whole experience.
I do not feel helpless or powerless anymore.
Yeah, you don't strike me as someone who's powerless at all.
No.
You really have a beautiful energy. It's very contagious.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what would you say are the biggest things that you're grateful for, your blessings in your life?
First and foremost, I'm grateful to have a connection with my higher power. I don't need to get into exactly what that means to me, but I call it God, but it's source energy, it's the universe. I mean, it's everything. Just acknowledging that and like going within and connecting with that part of myself and like having a daily ritual and practice to do that has been a game changer. So that I'm most grateful for. And of course my sobriety. Without that, I don't see any of the blessings that are in my life. I don't see that my life is a blessing. I don't see that opening my eyes is a blessing. And I would definitely say my husband. Yeah, having this man in my life that supports me and pushes me and lifts me up where I don't even see I need lifted, like pushing me to do the podcast. Like I feel like my experience is one of my greatest blessings.
Absolutely. The whole shebang.
I wouldn't change a thing. Like people say, I wish I could go back to when I was 14 and do it over. And I'm like, I don't know any other way. I don't want to. I got right now. I get to choose right now what to rewrite. I don't need to go back and do that. I need all that stuff.
Yeah.
I need to unbecome a lot of those things that I learned in survival mode.
Right.
Right. But that's okay because I learned them,
Right.
but I don't have to still embody them.
That's right. Yes, you don't have to let them they can inform who you are without you be embodying them.
Yeah.
So what about the lessons? What would you say are the biggest lessons?
So the biggest lessons, our choices determine our outcomes.
Mm,
Our perspective determines our experience. We get to choose what we get. We don't get to choose our circumstances, but we get to choose how we perceive them. Like we can pause in a situation, like take a breath, and then choose to see it differently. I do see that I was I'd lived my life thinking that I was a victim. I was a victim of my own thinking. And like our thoughts can change our life. Like I've learned from all of these people. I do have to say, I don't know, I do know why. I'm a huge for agreements person.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the best lessons I've learned about having a better like human experience, don't take things personally. Do your best not to. Don't make things about you. Don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
Like either have a clarifying conversation or put it out of your mind. But
Yeah.
don't take the unnecessary things onto yourself and then carry them around. Like
Mhm.
there's enough that you're going to face. You don't need to add to it and imagine it. We're imagining those things, and always do your best. Like I love that because some days when I don't get out of my pajamas and I like veg in front of the TV, I'm doing my best. I did that the day after Christmas. It was wonderful. But that was my best because I needed to rest and recover. But like,
Exactly.
and definitely like the other one is being impeccable with your words. Like I used to just say whatever I thought you wanted to hear or what would get me what I thought I wanted. And today, like I mean what I say and I say what I mean. So
Wow. Well, you're in such a beautiful place in life. It was a rough road getting there.
it was so rough.
But what did it all mean, do you think? What was the purpose of all of that?
So I do believe like my mom and I both believe, even though like we grew up Mormon, we both believe that we do choose our life plan. That you choose these challenges and these obstacles. You choose what lessons that you're going to come across for, your growth and your
You choose
soul's
it now in this life, or you have chosen it?
like you choose it before you get here. Like if you have a pain in the ass
Yeah.
father or a
It's been
yeah,
decided somehow before you came into this physical body.
yes. So that's kind of what we always talked about is like that, pre-agreement. And I don't put like a ton of thought into it, but it makes sense of like this is my stuff to learn.
Mhm.
Like, because I don't look at it and go, man, well, that sure would have gone differently. I mean, there are some things that I wish I wouldn't have caused somebody else some pain or whatever, but that's also part of their plan. I feel like we have these like obstacles and these challenges, but in the greater scheme of things, like the things that seem like life altering and life ending are not. The
Mhm.
things that we feel are going to completely break us and kill us don't. Like they can be a starting point, to grow and to evolve and to open up. Like we need to get cracked wide open sometimes, and it sucks that it's so painful, but it's so worth it. Like the breakthroughs after the breakdowns, like those things that you hear, like it's so true.
We learn the best lessons from the hardest things.
Hmm.
So you have this podcast where you're going to be talking to people about their experiences with sobriety and other hard lessons that they've learned. And so what do you think about the fact that you're doing that? Is that tied into your purpose somehow?
It is my purpose. Absolutely. I feel like I have found my purpose. So I feel like joy is my purpose. But I
Mm.
also feel like in starting to do this work, like it's not just my story and it's not just recovery, because the things that we learn in doing the 12 steps, they can apply to anyone and everyone. And you replace I'm powerless over alcohol with people, places, things, life.
Mhm.
Like if we take away our power, and I don't mean in like the spiritual power, but in our power to control and our power to for outcomes, like the things that are totally out of our control, if we like set those things down and give them over
Mm.
and just focus on what we can do, like I'm talking to all these people who have faced these different things in life. Like there are people that I'm talking to that are in recovery, but I'm also talking to like someone who is in late life divorce and also is dealing with PTSD,
Mm.
and another friend who is a divorce coach who, you struggle with like the endings and then how to begin again after that life transition. And like, I want to shine a light on all these situations to let people know that like other people are there and this is what we did and this is where we get to be after.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I think the more people that can do that in this life, it's just contributes to the greater good in unimaginable ways.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, one last question I have for you, Brandy. What
Uh,
is the most important thing?
Love, not romantic love. Love. My meditation, my guided meditation this morning was I am willing to, here it is. I am love. Everything in me and outside of me is love. Today I choose to repeat this, believe this, and commit to this. I am love. Anything else I have chosen to believe is false evidence appearing real. What I choose to see as real today is love and only love. It really is like looking at things and either seeing that someone's attacking us or seeing that there's a hurt person projecting and then choosing not to absorb that. Like that's seeing things through the eyes of love. I think that's the most important thing because that includes kindness and that includes empathy and sympathy and it's all inclusive. And to me, that's what God is. That's what our energetic force is. It's just this vibrating love.
I totally agree with you.
Uh,
Oh my gosh. Well, Brandy, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable and just beautiful. Your spirit just it shines through.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so great to talk to.
Oh, well, I just listen. You do all the work. It's pretty amazing. So, thank you.
Thank you again. Yeah.